In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful.
So I want to start off with Brother Zain Dawah first. So inshallah, if you want to come up and talk about your story, about how Dawah impacted you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So that was impacted me obviously in a lot of ways. Number one, I found that I had a ginger beard, so that was good. Alhamdulillah, no. In reality, so in all seriousness, the only reason why I'm Muslim today is because this man right here was not afraid to speak about what the truth is, about the deen. So when I had questions, when I was struggling, he was there for me, and he was so proud to be Muslim. He said, Alhamdulillah, and he did everything he could. And obviously, through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he brought me to Islam and helped me and answered questions and did everything he could. So I want everyone to understand that you might not think that you can have this big impact, and maybe if you're lucky, you can take someone's shahada, right? But you never know how you're impacting someone. So be proud to be Muslim, say Alhamdulillah, and we have to stand up for what's right and speak about our deen and the truth. So that's all I can say. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Brother Zain obviously has been one of the first people that helped I invited to Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one who had guided him. And I want you guys to understand that when it comes to da'wah, one of the first techniques that I'm going to teach you is a very, very simple one. It's called friendship. It's called showing someone love and giving them a home, because that's what Islam is all about. It's about building up that brotherhood. And speaking of building up the brotherhood, the next person I want to introduce to you all is Brother Caden Cologne. I used to know him back in high school, and then we separated for about 10 years. And then one time I'm giving dawah in the streets in New Brunswick, and then I hear somebody go, Assalamu alaikum. Yo. And this man popped up, and that's ever since then we've been like this. So, Caden.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Caden, also known as Musa. So yeah, Dawah. Like he said previously, I met Ayyan and reconnected with him through Dawah. I saw him giving Dawah on the street of New Brunswick. I was going to get a haircut. And he was doing his thing in the moment. But my story, a little bit of that, is basically I came into Islam through Dawah. Actually, ironically, through a revert. And he was a revert of maybe a few days. And something important to know about dawah is the best dawah is through your actions, right? You can say whatever you want to say, but people are always watching. So my friend, as I knew him at work well before he was Muslim, I won't go too into depth, but he became a very different person after he became Muslim. I saw his character, his akhlaq. He was glowing a different way. And another important thing to mention is your what you wear as a Muslim and your attire. Our Muslim attire. There's no specific thing that we wear, but at the same time, there's many different variations. But he wore a kufi, and he was very disciplined. This is also something that I was very attracted to, his discipline and how he would just go make salah and work. And yeah, so dawah was imperative to me coming to Islam. It's such a beautiful thing, and I actually learned a lot from dawah. And just learning about Islam in general, watching dawah videos. And as Muslims, we just need to know that, as our brother had mentioned earlier, it is not just the 5 daily prayers we need to keep up with, but it is our onus, it is our duty, our responsibility to be out here inviting, because that's what dawah is, to invite people to Islam. And, alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim of almost 2 years in February, so
MashaAllah.
I couldn't be happy enough, and alhamdulillah again. So, yeah, it's just a little bit of my story.
And inshallah, the last brother I want to invite this time is Brother Anthony Rappa. So,
I don't really want to talk about my story because I talked about it a long time. So I'm just going to talk about how important dawah is in general. Not just dawah, but making sure someone feels involved in the community is very important, because if you don't, if you're not there to help someone out after they revert, after they take their shahada, they can start to fall off. So it is very important that you guys really make sure a new brother especially, is involved in the community, because otherwise they don't feel involved. They're just going to go off back, especially when they have friends. I just know personally, if they have friends that are, they're obviously not Muslims themselves, they're not around discipline, so they're just gonna fall right back to their old habits, especially since Islam is very, very foreign to the Western society and just us as growing up in America or just in Western society in general. You have to be there because if you're not there, their old friends are, and they're just gonna bring them right back in. So that's unfortunately how a lot of people after they take shahada, they stay. That's the last time you'll see them at the masjid because no one is there to offer them a hand. So fortunately, Ayyan was always there, and he's a great friend. So that's another thing. You have to have a lot of character. Be there for them through Islam, giving them Islamic knowledge, but also just being a friend as well because that's very important.
Jazakallah khair. So inshallah, afterwards, if you guys have time, I highly encourage you to speak with our revert brothers, show them the love that you have for Islam, share in that love to be able to connect with one another. So let's get right into it. And the very first question I have is a simple one. What is dawah? What's the definition for dawah? Calling people to Islam. Actually, that brother who just answered it as well, that's Brother Umar. He took his shahada a few weeks ago. He embraced Islam. His family's from Puerto Rico originally. But inshallah, at this time, I'm going to allow him to keep to himself right now because he asked to. So one day, inshallah, we'll bring you back up here. So da'wah itself is calling people to Islam, right? In the Quran, it says in chapter 16, verse 125, call to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best. Indeed, your Lord is most knowing of who has strayed from this way, and he is most knowing of who is rightly guided. The need and the importance of dawah, especially in the society, is something that we have to stress. The brothers talked about it. Within the West, within America, we have a responsibility here because of the way that the society operates. When you think about the way America is and the sort of principles of this society, what are the first things that comes to your mind? What are the core principles of America if you were to define a society? Is it a religious society? It's a secular society. For people that don't know what that term means, what does secular mean?
Removed from religion.
Removed from religion. Separation of church and state, but specifically, I think it's more towards removal altogether from religion. And as part of that, when you're someone that removes yourself from religion itself, what do you take as your guiding North Star? What becomes your principle? Your desires, right? This is the term that's called hedonism. And who knows what hedonism itself means?
Following your whims and desires without any model.
Exactly. So you're following your whims and your desires, things that make you happy. The pursuit of happiness is exactly what is defined as the guiding North Star of American society. So when you live within this society, you have to compare this to the message of the prophets. And how did the prophets operate? So let me ask you guys this. Who knows about the Salah of Prophet Noah? Do we learn about that in the Quran? Do we learn about the fasting of Prophet Shuhaib? Do we learn about the Hajj of Prophet Musa? We don't learn about those things? It's not in the Quran? What is the common story or message between all the different prophets?
Spreading the message of Islam and then standing up to the non-believers.
Brothers, why are my Reaver brothers answering this? Come on now, right? They're the ones who are telling us it is the common message of calling people to Islam. What is the Shahada? La ilaha illallah. That's it. That is the main message that was consistent through all the prophets. Whether it was Abraham when he was thrown into the fire, when Musa was being kicked out of his state, or it was the fact that people like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was persecuted because of his beliefs. This is the unifying factor when it comes to the prophet's stories. So I want you guys to think about the idea of who should be giving da'wah, right? Why is it that you should be the ones that call to Islam? Why is it important for us as people who live in the society to give dawah? What's the reasons? Why should we be giving dawah? What are the reasons? Why are we giving dawah? Now you guys can answer.
To call people to Islam.
Sure. Calling people to Islam is what you're doing. Why are you doing it? Why are you calling people to Islam? You're one of the readers. I can't let you answer. Don't put the pressure on everyone else.
Save yourself from Jahannam and the others around you.
Save yourself, save the others to guide them to Islam so that way they can be guaranteed Jannah. What else? What else is reasons that we want to be giving da'wah?
To enlighten people.
To enlighten people, we want to share the message, yes. There's a very simple answer. Number one is at the top of the list. Yes, it's the duty of all Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to give da'wah, right? The verse that I referred earlier, chapter 16, verse 125, says the exact same thing. And in chapter 28, verse 87 of the Quran, it says, invite to your Lord and don't be those who associate partners with Allah. And obviously everyone has heard the hadith, convey for me even if it is one verse, right? This is the common message of Islam. So Allah says to do it. Do you know how Allah dignifies the one that calls to Islam? What does Allah describe him as? Let me ask you this. In this society, when people talk about the people who are great at giving talks and giving speeches, who are the first people that come to our minds? Oh, that's fair. In society, in America. Politicians, right? Politicians are always the ones that we think of when it comes to being good with the communication, with communicating with other people, building up the relationships. They're constantly pandering to us. Who else? People are obsessed with what in this society? Celebrities. I can have people literally sing and rap entire lyrics of songs, and they can't even recite Surah Fatiha. Think about that. Reflect upon that. There's people in the society that are like that. Celebrities, obsession with TV characters, obsession with stars, sports players. These are the things that people focus on. So why is it that we have to give da'wah? Because we as Muslims have what? Who is our role model? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And sometimes it scares me to say this. A lot of people know more about the celebrities than they do about the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's an important reminder for us to study the seerah. But before we continue with the story of the Prophet and everything, I want to get right into the heart of the topic today, or the heart of the discussion. And that is the fundamental principles that we must cover in order for someone to be able to accept Islam. There's a technique that a lot of brothers utilize, and myself included, and it's called go rap. Has anyone ever heard that term, go rap, before? Put your hands down. Go rap. No one? All right, if I was going to tell you guys to take a guess when you hear go rap, it's an acronym. For those of you who don't know what acronym means, those letters G, O, R, and P represent principles or the fundamentals of Islam. So who can guess what G would stand for? Guidance. What else? Who wants to take another guess? If you're talking to someone that doesn't believe in Allah, what's the first thing that you have to establish with them? Credibility? Absolutely. But what are you trying to prove? God. You have to prove God exists. If you can't even prove God exists, what are you going to talk to him about the Quran for? Huh? He doesn't care. So the second thing that you have to prove after God exists is something that starts with an O, and it's a core tenet of Muslims' belief. What does Tawheed translate to? Oneness of Allah. So that's the O. And the next one is R, right? And R, who wants to take a guess? Sorry? Revelation. I'll give it to you guys. Revelation, so Quran itself. And then P. What'd you say? Practice? No. Prophets. Yes, it's the prophets. So these are the core tenets that we're going to be covering today, and I will start with God's existence. Young man, yeah, you right there with the hat. You want to come up to the front real quick? You sure? You scared? Oh, okay. I promise it's not going to be difficult. Do you want to come? Okay. What about you? You want to come up? What are you, in high school? All right, humor me. Come up real quick. So I want you to like visualize something with me. Let's say, for example, you and I. What's your name?
Mustafa.
Mustafa?
Yeah.
Mustafa, you and I are walking through the Sahara Desert. Okay? What's this phone made out of? What's the screen made out of on the phone?
Glass.
Glass? What's the cover made out of?
Metal. Plastic.
Plastic, right? So glass and plastic, what are they, what makes glass? Sand. There you go. And then what makes plastic? What's refined to make plastic?
Oil.
Nice, dude. I don't know. Good job, man. You knew that one by yourself. Petroleum, right? Oil. So both of these two things are found where?
Ground. Earth.
Sand and oil. Where would you find it?
Earth. Like desert.
The desert. Man, you got this. 2 for 2. Good job. So when you're in the desert and you're walking there, say you and I are walking, Mustafa, and we're walking through a desert, the sand's sanding, the earth is earthing, the sun is sunning. And I said to you, look at that phone on the ground. And I said to you that phone, after billions and billions of years of the sand sanding and the earth earthing and the sun sunning, that is how that phone came to be. And actually, you can pick up that device and just call your mom right now. Would you look at me and believe me, or would you think something else?
I don't think something.
Say it.
I would think like it's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's just exist.
Why is it impossible for that phone not to have existed over billions of years? I mean, look, the sand is there, the oil is there, everything is present for it to be made.
It's so complex.
Complex in design. Okay, so what makes you think that if that phone that you see that's in the ground had to have been made by someone, why couldn't it have been just created? You say it's complex. So because of its complexity, you think that there had to be someone that created it. So let me ask you something. When you compare that phone that you say is complex in design, and you say because it's complex in design and it has a creator, what's more complex, this phone or you? Why are you more complex?
Because there's so many stuff in our body that's like more complex than the phone.
So when you compare our bodies to the phone itself, what's stronger, the computer processor in this or your brain? Brain. The brain was the one that put it together. When you consider the fact that you have eyes, what's stronger, this camera or your eyes? Your eyes. You don't have to zoom in with these. You don't have to focus these. Your eyes are able to see and your eyes are able to capture image. Your lungs, your heart, your veins, your nervous system, all of these existing inside one body. So if you're going to say because of a complex design, you can say, because of that complex design that exists within the phone, you know that there's a creator, why would you not say the same thing about the universe? Think about how intricate this body is designed. And if you wanted to take it a step further, what's more complex, our bodies or the universe? Universe. Why is the universe more complex? What are some examples of its complexity?
It's bigger.
It's bigger. What's in the universe?
Planets, universes, etc.
Right? So there's the planets, there's the stars, there are all these different resources. Let me ask you something. Is iron found on the earth? Is iron made and was always part of Earth itself? No. Iron came from space. Iron came from meteors, it came from all these asteroids and things like that. And that's why it's present on the planet Earth. Guess what said that? Thousands of years ago, there's a little book. You know what that book was called? The Quran. Right? So we'll get to that later, but that's the intricacy of this universe. Clearly, there had to be a designer for it because this universe abides by the laws of physics, the theory of relativity, the laws of gravity. All these things apply to the universe, and the universe abides by it. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. There's a specific zone that the Earth operates in. Who knows what it's called? The Goldilocks zone. And so for people that don't know or haven't read the story, what does Goldilocks zone mean?
If it's too close to the sun, then you're not too far.
So he said that if the Earth was too close to the sun, it would burn up. And if it was slightly further away, the Earth would have frozen. How long does it take for the Earth to spin on its axis? How long is a day? 24 hours. If the Earth took longer than that, let's say instead of taking 24 hours to spin around, it took a whole month for it to spin, what would happen? If the Earth took a month for it to complete one day, what would happen?
It would be day and night, longer.
It would be significantly longer. But think about it like this. If the sun wasn't shining, how cold would that area be? Right? Again, that's part of the fact that the Earth is constantly rotating itself. It's a rotisserie chicken. It's constantly rotating through the heat, and it's being able to heat the parts that need to be heated. So that is another thing that we have to reflect upon, and we see that there is complex design in Earth itself. Does that argument make sense? We call that the intelligent design argument in terms of understanding how complex this universe is and how it came to be. Have we established G? Does that sound like a plan? God's existence doesn't make sense. Yes. Can we proceed? Okay. So the next one is oneness of Allah. The thing that you have to show now is that that being that you've decided to call the intelligent designer, the creator of the universe, has to be uniquely one. Why is that? Why does there have to be only one creator? Let me do another example. How many world powers are there? What are the countries that consider themselves world powers?
USA, China, Russia.
Say it.
USA, China.
Russia. Okay, so you have USA, you have China, you have Russia, you have these three nations that consider themselves world powers. What is the system of government, or say system of economy, that the US uses? Democracy, and then what's the economics? Capitalism, okay. And then you compare that to Russia. What does Russia have? Communism. China, to a certain extent, communism, some level of free markets. Let's go with socialism. So you have these three varying forms of government and economics. If they consider to talk about their power within the nation, which country thinks that they're the greatest? Each of them, right? Right? If you went to China and you talk to a Chinese politician, they're going to tell you that this is the greatest country. You talk to an American politician, right? They're going to say that this is the greatest nation. You go and talk to the Russians, they will say that this is the greatest nation. So if they were to go and try and resolve that dispute, what would happen? War. And they would be in a conflict, or a constant state of conflict. They were constantly fighting one another. And if you look at history, that is pretty reflective of human society, right? Even for the past, let's say, 100 years almost, the war of politics between the US and Russia and China has existed for most of our lives, and our parents' lives, and our grandparents' lives. So that's something for you to reflect upon. They're constantly in war. What does the Quran say?
I know in Arab.
Well, they need to hear it in English.
I'll try to translate it.
Okay.
in Arabic says ما اتخذ الله من ولد وما كان معه من إله إذا لذهب كل إله بما خلق والعالم بعضهم من بعض. In the verse it denies that Allah has a son, and it says that if there was like multiple gods, each god would go with the one that they created, والعالم بعضهم من بعض, and they would be trying to be superior to over the other,
Mhm.
and then subhanAllah.
So the brother was saying that in the Quran, it shows us that if there had been multiple creators, Allah says that they would be constantly in conflict with one another, trying to get the advantage over the other. And that is clearly demonstrated within world powers today, the idea of there having to be a power struggle amongst those that consider themselves all powerful. Now I want to return back to even our original concept, right? When we consider how the universe came to be and we consider the intelligent design, how many of you guys have ever played a sport? Let's go with soccer specifically, right? In soccer, if one person kicks the ball, there's a specific direction that ball travels. Yes? Kick it like this, it's going to go forward. If two people try to kick the ball at the same time, what happens? Right? Whoever's stronger probably gets the momentum. But do you know what direction that ball is guaranteed to go in? No, it can go anywhere, right? And even so, most likely, if two people try to kick at the same time, they probably break each other's ankles. So this is the state of conflict that we see in terms of there being multiple people trying to push something to start. Compare that to the universe. Had there been multiple creators, whose will would have superseded the others? Meaning, if one says that this is the law of gravity, and the other says, no, I want the law of gravity like this, whose will would have preceded or superseded the others? There's no way to tell. The only way to resolve that dispute is by being in a state of conflict. And if the world or universe itself was in an eternal state of conflict, what would happen to us? If the universe was always in conflict, we would fail to exist. We would not exist, because then you have to consider the fact that the Earth and the planets and everything is on its own orbit. It's perfectly rotating. They never collide. One says, I want the Earth to rotate this way. The other God says, I want the Earth to rotate another way. They're going to be constantly fighting each other. So that is why you need to have one creator. But for that one creator, what are the characteristics that must be associated with the character or with that creator? What are the characteristics of the creator? Just, sure, absolutely.
Jealous, he doesn't like no partners.
He doesn't need partners. He doesn't need partners. I wouldn't go with jealous. I would say he doesn't need partners because that's part of being all-powerful. What else? All-knowing. We just laid out a whole bunch of things that you guys probably haven't studied since high school. Theory of gravity, Goldilocks zone, all these sort of laws and concepts that the universe follows had to have been decided by somebody. If there was a law created, there had to be a law creator. What else? What are some other characteristics of this creator that you can think of? All powerful, all willing. What if I said that that creator could be found within the universe? Does that make sense? Could the creator be part of the creation? Why not? He created it, sure, but why can't he be part of it? Why can't he decide that, one day I want to come down to the planet Earth and die for people's sins?
That would be making God more human-like in a way, in the position.
Wouldn't that make God limited? The idea of a God being limited, a God that can bleed, a God that needs sustenance. How does that apply to our understanding of that word? So the creator itself has to be operating outside of our understanding of this universe, meaning it cannot be confined by it. So when we talk about our lives, are we all going to die one day? Right? So that creator has to be eternal. It cannot die. The second thing is that we ourselves are confined by space. and confined by time. The creator, by definition, cannot be limited by those two factors. Space and time does not apply to the creator because it operates outside of it. We cannot imagine the size of Allah. We cannot imagine the space that it takes up. These are things that simply do not make sense because it doesn't apply to something that doesn't exist within the universe. As us, as humans, our understanding of the universe is defined by what we can see, touch, smell, hear, etc. So the creator does not reside within those limitations. Does that make sense in terms of why that the creator has to be one? The example that we gave about the multiple creators of the war is just one of the examples that we can utilize to establish the oneness of Allah. You can also utilize the idea that when you compare creator, was the creator created? Did the creator create itself? Did the creator come from something that was created? These are another train of thought that you can utilize. But with that being said, I want to move to the next step, which would be revelation. So we have established now that there had to be a creator that exists, and that creator had to be uniquely one. Why does revelation need to apply? Why do we need revelation? Communicate. But can't he just talk to us? Why is that? Why can't the creator just talk to each person directly? What would happen? See, if I flew with my brother Caden and he says, yo, God spoke to me today. And I said, Caden, what are you talking about? And Caden goes, yeah, like I'm going to open the door on the airplane. I'm going to jump out. Does that make sense? So what happens if people start saying that they spoke with God directly? Everyone has a different message. There is no unified message. The problem that we would run into is everyone would think that the thing that they hear in their head is not an issue. It is God speaking to them. So we have to be clear that that's not the case. The brothers said something very important, which is like the idea of unification has to unite us in a purpose. That's what the purpose of the revelation is for. And it provides us a clear guidance. When you go back to the phone example, when you're setting up your phone for the first time, right? What does it teach you? Does it just, boom, just gives you the phone? It teaches you how to do what?
Go through all the UI and the settings, languages, and how it's been accustomed to you.
All right, you use the term UI. You think everyone understands what UI means? All right, so you go through the entire process of setting up the phone. It asks you, okay, what's your name? What do you want to be called by? Add your contacts. This is how you set up your Apple ID, your login for the phone. Or if you're on Samsung, God knows what that is. The other things that it tells you to do is also adding how to have phone calls, setting up contacts, and setting up your applications and things like that. The phone is teaching you how to utilize itself. It was clear that the person that created that phone had enough intellect to be able to say, hey, the person that's probably using this has no idea how to set this up. So it gives you a guide. And we already established before that the phone is clearly not as complex as this universe, is it not? So if we think about this universe itself, wouldn't it make sense that the one that created it would have sent down a guidance for us to be able to successfully live within it? That's exactly what the Quran is. The Quran is a simple guidance. So when we think about the purpose of our lives, what do we say is the purpose of lives for us as creation? Worship Allah. That's it. The whole entire idea is that the purpose of the Quran is that it teaches exactly that. La ilaha illallah. How do you worship Allah? Why do you worship Allah? And the necessity for humans to worship Allah. It provides you that guidance in terms of the how. Now, if someone was to come to you and they say, well, I hear you. I understand that you do need, that there has to be some level of revelation, that God had to have sent down some level of guidance. Why is it that you as a Muslim think the Quran is the right guidance? How do you prove that the Quran is the word of Allah? Yes, preservation of the Quran itself. In chapter 15, verse 9 of Quran, Allah says, it is certainly we who have revealed the reminder, and it is certainly we who will preserve it. Allah swears in the Quran that it will be preserved. You Hafaz? Are you a Hafiz? You are? So when you became a Hafiz, did you just sit down and learn? How did you learn? Not yet. Not the whole thing. Okay, no problem. But do you have a teacher?
Yes.
Okay, so you learned from your teacher.
Yes.
Did your teacher learn from someone?
Probably he learned from
Someone, right? There's an entire process that goes into it, and there's an entire accreditation that goes into it. There's a process called the ijaza. Who knows what that is?
Ijaza is like when you like certification, like when you're certified like to teach it to others.
And that entire certification, right, the ijaza itself goes all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there's an entire chain that has been established that says this person learned from the Prophet, who learned, who taught, all the way up to, inshallah, the young leaders that will one day become the memorized of the Quran, the reciters of the Quran here in this masjid. The second thing, if we wanted to prove that the Quran is the word of Allah, what would you want to talk about? There's a challenge that's made in the Quran. What's the challenge? Yes, bring one ayah like it, right? In the Quran, it says in chapter 2, verse 23, and if you are all in doubt about what I have revealed to my servant, bring a single chapter like it and call your witnesses before God if you are truthful. Who knows why this verse was revealed? What was happening during the time? Right? In the Arab culture, the people, especially the Arabs, were known to be poets. They were said that they were very sophisticated in speech. And because of that, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came with the Quran and started reciting it, started preaching it to the people, his enemies started saying, just a poet. Just another Arab who has very skilled language. So the Quran came with the verse and said to those people that if you have the same quality of poets, if you so claim that this came from poets, then why don't you bring someone to challenge the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Bring a chapter like it. And then from a chapter, it went down to even a small verse. That was the challenge that was presented by the Quran. And to this day, no one's been able to replicate it. The second thing is, or the third thing, is clarity of who is God. That if this guidance came to people to worship that creator, it would make it abundantly clear who the creator is. There would be no doubts. There would be no doubts about what our principle or our sort of focus in Islam would be. What chapter in the Quran makes it absolutely clear about who is Allah? What chapter? Surah Fatiha is the guidance. Surah Ikhlas, right? And in Surah Ikhlas, I will give you a quick translation. In chapter 112, it goes, say he is God, the one and alone. God, the one whom everything needs and who himself needs nothing. He is not born, nor does he beget. And there is nothing that can be compared unto him. That is a clear statement of Tawheed and the nature of Allah. Indisputable. So when people come and say, oh, show me in verse in the Quran where it makes it clear to you who Allah is, Allah says, I'll give you a whole chapter. That is why we focus on the oneness of Allah. The last part here, and I think someone touched upon this, they describe the nature of Allah as being just. So argument 4 is the universal message or the application of the Quran itself. So let me ask you guys this. What are some of the universal tenets or messages of the Quran? Universal meaning it applies to everyone. Death is something that happens to all of us. I'm talking about a message that's found in the Quran. What's the universal messages? It applies to everyone. It doesn't matter your race, religion, or your creed. All walks of life can apply to this. Respect, right? It teaches us ikhlaq. We talked about good manners. It has that in the Quran. In order for society to operate, to ensure that society itself is not constantly in conflict with one another, or making sure that us as a society are not going past our limits or not transgressing, what do we need to have? What's the word that scares American society? Starts with an S. Sharia. There's got to be laws put into place. And if there's laws, there's got to be a justice system that's able to enforce those laws. So the universal message consists of these sorts of things. The laws of society, how to treat people in terms of respect, how not to cheat people, how not to be rude to people, how you shouldn't be committing adultery, how you shouldn't be bribing people. These are all tenets of what makes a Muslim, because the Prophet says that a Muslim is defined by his character. And Islam came as nothing more than to perfect good character. And so this leads us to the final part. This is just a few examples of arguments that we can use, those 4 arguments in terms of application to society, in terms of being able to talk about the preservation of the Quran, the inability for people to reproduce something like the Quran, and the fact that the Quran clearly talks about who the creator is. So now the last piece that we want to cover is the prophethood. I know we're running through this, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Prophethood. Why is it that we need to be able to prove prophethood? What's the reasoning there? We just talked about the Quran as being the revelation of Allah. Why do we need a prophet?
Because the prophets received revelation. Because the prophets were the one who received the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And if they're the ones that received revelation from Allah, what cannot apply to these people? When you think of the people who we consider the prophets, who are they? Who are some of the examples of the prophets? Name them. Prophet Adam. Who else? Musa. Ibrahim. The stories of these individuals in the Quran constantly talk about their what? Their trials, their struggles. You realize that they go through all these sorts of issues with themselves, and these struggles and these tribulations that they face define their character. So let me ask you something. How would you argue to prove that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is a prophet of God? What would you say to someone? You want to take it? That's right, we're shooting today.
Because to him, the Quran is revealed, the message of Allah.
To him, the Quran was revealed. Let me do this another way then. How about we talk about what are the common sorts of things that people accuse the Prophet of, where they're trying to actually denounce his prophethood? What are the things that you hear some of your friends, maybe some of the Islamophobes say? Why is the Prophet Muhammad not a prophet? He was a warlord. He was someone that would cheat. He's someone that cared about power. He was someone that was obsessed with getting ahead of society. So someone that's obsessed with getting ahead of society, he's obsessed with greed. He's obsessed with money. He's obsessed with power. What else? What else do people say? What else do people say about the Prophet? Possessed? Yeah, so people would say either he was a magician or he was possessed. So they would say that clearly he was not someone that was doing this on the will of a good being or the will of his own, but he was sent to lead people astray. So I want to go through each of these sorts of arguments, and then inshallah we'll be able to have a discussion around them. The first one I want to go into is whether or not the Prophet was a liar. He was deluded. Was he truthful? What was his character like? Now, the reason that this claim doesn't have any merit in terms of the Prophet being a liar is that if the Prophet was a liar, his character would have been known as that. Meaning that if he came with the Quran and people are now saying that he's a liar, we should have seen those sorts of tendencies beforehand, no? Who knows the story of what happened with the Prophet when he went, or when Abu Sufyan went and spoke with Heracles? Who knows that story? What happened when Abu Sufyan went and spoke with Heracles, the king? My Sheikh, I can't ask you. You already know that.
He asked him about his character.
He asked him about his character and who follows him. What are the people like that follow him, and what is his character? And so he asked Abu Sufyan to answer these questions, and he had his tribesmen stand behind him. So he told the tribesmen, if he's lying, then motion to me so that I can know that he's lying. So he didn't want to appear as a liar before the people, so he was forced to tell the truth.
So Abu Sufyan was told to attest to the character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even at this point, when the person that wanted to basically take over, the one that would want the Islam to end, when he was asked about the character of the Prophet beforehand, he said that no, he wasn't known as these things. He was trustworthy. What was the name that was given to the Prophet even before he became the Prophet? Al-Sadiq al-Amin. Right? The trustworthy, the truthful. That was his reputation prior to even having received revelation. Now, the second thing that I want to get into is the idea that he would have been deluded. And that if someone was deluded, they would say crazy things. Oftentimes, we have people come and they claim prophethood even to this day. As told you, Caden one time tried to tell me that we should open the door on a plane. It's not a man of a prophet, definitely not a man that had received revelation. So what if we talk about the sort of revelations that the Prophet received, or maybe the predictions he made about the future of society? They should have been false, no? If the Prophet was making claims about the future of society, then those things should have failed if he was truly deluded. That if he was making things and making statements about what the world would be like, let's say 1,000 years later, they would be absolutely false. One of my favorite hadith that I always talk about is how the Prophet predicted that you will see the barefooted Bedouins competing in the construction of tall buildings. What does that remind you of? He's supposed to say Burj Khalifa? Absolutely, that's the exact right answer. So Burj Khalifa, Saudi Arabia, Oman, all these countries are currently competing in the idea of building the tallest buildings. If you actually compare this to the story of the biblical stories, I study comparative religion, so this is really interesting to me. The story of Cain and Abel and the Babylonians. The people that went astray, essentially they would compete constantly and trying to get higher and higher. And they would also compete in building tall structures. Why? Because their idea was what? Who knows what their concept of building as high as possible was? Why would they want to build as high? They can reach what? They can reach God. They can reach heaven. That was their concept. And now if you actually compare this to the Quran, why is that we see shooting stars?
Because the shayateen, they try to go up and deal with the angels.
In the Quran, it says that the shooting stars themselves are the shayateen when they're trying to reach to the heavens, and it's them getting knocked down, right? So if you connect all these sort of common messages together, you see that the thing that the shayateen, the thing that the jinns, the things that the people who were astray were always obsessed with was the idea of competing for status. And their greatest sign of status, for some reason, was building as high as they could and trying to get their way to heaven. Sometimes it's buildings, maybe today it's the space race and the obsession to go and become interplanetary beings. But that is a common sign of those that were led astray. So the next piece I wanted to cover was the character of the Prophet in terms of his message that he received itself. Who knows the common argument that people try to make about the Prophet when it comes to Aisha? Right, they say that he had married someone that was underage, things like that. People try to change history. People are trying to change the way that society works in order to justify the fact that they have gripes against the Prophet or try to disprove Islam. You'll see that people go so far as to try to bend the way that history works in order for them to say that Islam is false. This is why it's important for us to be able to study on the seerah of the Prophet, to understand how not only the Prophet lived his life, but for us to understand how society back then actually operated. There are easy ways for us to be able to address those questions, but that's not for today. My point being is that if you guys want to be able to address the prophethood, today we talked about why he's not a liar. We also talked about why he's not deluded. We talked about his character, his reputation. These are things that are just basic arguments that we can choose to show that he was a prophet of Allah. The rest is up to you. And that's exactly why I'm here today. We've covered GoRap. Now the question is, how do you implement it? How do you go about giving dawah? And it doesn't start with more than the amount of people that are here, even less. Dawah starts with one person. There's a certain term that's used to describe dawah. What kind of fard is it? What kind of fard? Fard al-kifaya. What does it mean? If one person does it, then it takes care of that requirement for all of society. Sounds great, doesn't it? But what if I check out tomorrow? There's no guarantee that I will be here. So a young da'i is gone. The question is, who will step up? So for me, when I look at our role within the United States and we talk about the importance of giving da'wah, I don't say that it is a fard upon one person and it covers it for everyone. I say it is fard upon each and every person, because if we don't do it, then everyone is led astray. It is important for us to give dawah not only to people that aren't Muslim, but also our own friends and family who are weak in their deen. No one's going to admit it. Everyone's going to say, I am Muslim, and I am proud Muslim. You go and see during the protests and the marches, everyone's there. Yes, I'm willing to defend Islam. But when it comes to time for them to pray, they're not there at the prayers. When it comes time for them to fast for Ramadan, they're not there during Ramadan. But they'll be there for Eid because it's time for me to collect the check, right? So dawah is not just limited to people who are not Muslim, it's to your friends as well. And that is why also it's important for us to constantly create a community that welcomes back people that embrace Islam. Because this right here, for a lot of people, is their home. This is the place that they come to meet their brothers and sisters in Islam so they can build up a relationship with each and every one of you and get closer to Allah. So the question is, how do we do it? Starts with you. So inshallah today what I ask you guys is, my goal is to start a dawah committee here within Monroe for you guys to be able to work together and start doing small activities. It might sound like a lot. I'm not telling you shake Uthman it, go outside and start going and debating people. That's not what we're here for. But I am saying, go ahead, set up a little table sometimes, once a month, maybe once every 2 months. Start small, do something. Set up that table. Maybe it's working with your local restaurants and things like that, being able to provide them with information and pamphlets about Islam. Well, I'll give you some examples of how you guys can get started today. Do you guys have a library here in Monroe? It's a pretty big one. There's a lot of people go to it still. Pretty big community center. So for us in East Brunswick next week, and I invite everyone to this as well, at the East Brunswick Public Library, we are doing a Muslim heritage event. And as part of that, we are inviting non-Muslims and Muslims. So that way they can come and experience Muslim culture with us. I like to call that light dawah, right? Just a little bit something for the people to be able to come and learn. They see the culture, they see the clothes, they see the way that we interact with one another, they see the hospitality. So you teach them a little bit of Islam. You pass a pamphlet out here, you talk to them about the Quran, about Islam. It's easy. Something as simple as doing a library event is where you can start. The other thing that you can do in order to be able to do dawah is exactly in this building. Who knows what I'm going to suggest? Invite non-Muslims here. You guys probably have to get permits in order for you to be able to open this building, have this operational, for you to be able to host the prayers that you do. I'm sure you're lost a lot of hair trying to be able to do all this, right? He's smiling. I didn't mean to be rude about that, but so when you talk about the idea of the process that it takes, the people that helped you in that process, invite them here. Sit down with the mayor, the councils, the clergy that are part of this community. Invite them to the masjid. And then on top of that, don't just preach at them. I'm not telling you, hey, tell them about the Quran. Here's all the chapters of the Quran. Here, 114 chapters, boom, 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 right? I'm saying build a relationship with them. Because when things get tough, you want them to be able to listen to you. So host an open masjid event. Anyone can come, friends, family. You have like 3 or 4 restaurants right next to you. Work with them, be able to invite people. That's something as simple as starting here. From there, you can expand. So inshallah, with that, those are just a couple of ideas. We can work on talking about more. I want to take some time now for you guys to be able to do some question and answers. Remember, I'm not a sheikh, so if you ask me for anything that's like fiqh related or anything about like the details of the Quran and things like that, above my pay grade. So I want you guys to be able just to focus on questions related to dawah, how you can get that started here. Inshallah, we can take a few minutes to be able to discuss that. I'll give it to whoever wants to start. No questions, everyone's good, everyone's gonna just go and do dawah tomorrow. He's gonna be leading street dawah right in the middle of the trains, like the train tracks over there. I see you, I know you can do it. We're good? No questions? All right then, inshallah. So I want to say thank you guys to everyone here. I did have a presentation put together, but unfortunately we weren't able to set it up. So if you guys want to come and see me, the first thing that I can do is have you guys scan a flyer or a QR code. It will add you to the statewide Whylslam Dawah channel, which is for volunteering. We have multiple different events going on weekly. So inshallah, if you guys want, you can start there, participate there. But I do want to take time to speak to community members who are interested in terms of how we can get the dawah started here locally. On behalf of everyone here at Whylslam, I want to say thank you to Monroe, to Numan Uncle especially for inviting us here and allowing us to host this presentation. My only dua is that this becomes a home not only to young da'is and older da'is, but especially a home to people who are new to Islam. Because the barakah, the blessings that comes with that, the love that it brings to you. I can speak personally that for me, being able to give dawah, having invited over 50 people to Islam, the fact that I still feel those goosebumps every single time that we do it. Tell us Arslan this. Every single time that we go out there and we give dawah, it's like you make a new brother, a new family member every single time someone accepts Islam. I get goosebumps going up and down my arms. I tell people this, that it's like it's the first time every single time. So to have that feeling makes you accountable. It makes you want to be better in your Islam. So if you weren't praying 5 times a day before, you'll start praying 5 times now. If you weren't practicing the recitation of the Quran, you'll start practicing now. If you weren't being able to understand and learn the lessons of the Prophet's seerah and his story and his life, you will do so now. These are the things that are important about giving dawah because it makes you a better person. So inshallah, if I have said anything wrong, that comes from me. And if I have said anything that's correct, that comes from Allah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, if you guys want to support our efforts here at Whylslam, please go to whylslam.org/barakah, BARAKAH. Jazakallah khair and assalamu alaikum.